Hello everyone, welcome to my dual machine tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about how to set up two machines, specifically a Maschine and a Maschine Mikro, to work together inside of the Maschine software similar to the way that Jeremy Ellis does it. So the first task that we have to do is making sure that our Maschine Mikro, or our secondary machine, whichever the case may be, is mapped out correctly. So the way that we're going to do this is we have to think about Maschines pads and how they're going to be oriented. So on the screen you should see a picture of how my machines are set up, just a little diagram. So the Maschine Mikro has been turned 90 degrees, which means the pads are no longer oriented the way that we need them to be to match up with the big machine. So the way that we fix this is we remap our entire setup. So everything is hinged around this C1. This C1 is pad 1, and we need to make sure that C1 turns into pad 1 when we rotate this 90 degrees. So it'll actually end up being pad 4. If you can understand what I'm talking about here, when we rotate this entirely 90 degrees, we have to change the values of each of these pads to match up with the 90 degree turn. So what we're going to do here is get machines set up so that we have our 90 degree turn. So just briefly, I'm going to hop over to my original one just to make sure that I'm oriented correctly. C sharp 1, D1, D sharp 1. Okay. Alright, so this entire row right here, this row, is going to end up getting put this way, with the C negative 1 here, C sharp 1, D negative 1, D sharp negative 1. So let's go ahead and do that. If it helps, you can go ahead and actually write down this entire grid onto a piece of paper, and then just turn the paper the same direction that you're turning your machine. So it's pretty easy to do, but I'm going to go ahead and do this real quick. So this first one needs to be C sharp negative, or C negative 1. Second one needs to be C sharp negative 1. This needs to be a D negative 1. D negative 1, and a D sharp negative 1. Alright, cool. So the next row we have is E negative 1. And then F negative 1. F sharp negative 1. And G negative 1. And the next row is G sharp negative 1. We should have an A negative 1, an A sharp negative 1, and a B negative 1. In our last row, this should be C0. This should be C sharp 0. This should be D0. Nope, too far. Went the wrong way, I believe. And then finally, D sharp 0. So, and you can do this for all of them, but just beware that you may have pads that overlap. So if I go into pad page B, let's look for this C0 in pad page B. We have a C0. So one thing you have to be careful of is, if you're going to do this, is at the very least go up an entire octave. So the highest octave we have here is C0. So just for good measure, in pad page B, start at a C positive 1. So we would go all the way up to C1, just to make sure we don't overlap anything. Now you also do need to pay attention to whatever this root note is, because when we get into the machine software, you'll see that that is our root note, and it is very important that we know what that root note is. Alrighty, so this is pretty much all we need to do inside of the controller editor for Maschine. For Maschine Mikro, the regular machine controller, you leave it completely alone, unless of course you have another, if you have two big machines, and you are using one of them as a secondary and the other as a primary. Then you would do the exact same thing that I did over here for the Maschine Mikro over to your regular machine. Alright, so let's go ahead and hop into the Maschine software. Okay, so now that we're in Maschine, let's go ahead and get this configured so that we can use the Maschine Mikro in combination with Maschine. So we've got the Maschine software open, and just briefly I'll show you the samples that we have in here. But give me a moment here. I'm going to make sure that I have... forget it. Okay, so I'm going to show you the samples. I have two different sample sets loaded. So right now I have the Groove Lock kit. I have that loaded, and then over on Group B I have a sample that I chopped from James Brown on the Goodfoot. Now if I go over and hit a key on Maschine Mikro, you can hear what it's doing there. So it's resampling whatever piece I happen to have set up, right? So from there what we end up doing is we need to get these pads from the notes that we told them to be to actually trigger each individual sound. And the way that we're going to do that is, first off, I'm going to be setting the Groove Lock kit to be on Maschine Mikro. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop over to the Group tab here, make sure we're there just for good measure. I feel like if I don't click on Group, then I mess something up. From there, we're going to click this drop-down arrow, and we're going to go to Sound MIDI Batch Setup. So we have a couple of different options here. We have the Restore Defaults, which is what it's doing now, where it just resamples based on the note we're pressing on Maschine Mikro. It resamples to that note on the keyboard. Sounds to MIDI channels is where you have different MIDI channels set up for each pad on Maschine, and sounds to MIDI notes, which is what we're going to be using, is how we take the defined note values of each pad on Maschine and turn them into specific pads over on the big machine. So this is where our root note comes in handy. You can see here that the root note is set to C3. As you remember, our root note was C-1, so we're going to go ahead and bring this down to C-1, and then we're going to go ahead and hit apply. C-1, hit apply. Okay, so now I'm going to hop over to the James Brown, and if any of you who knows how to use Maschine, you can see there's nothing in the sequencer, there's nothing recorded, and I'm not in the Groove Lock kit, but I'm playing on the Groove Lock kit. So on Big Machine controls the Maschine software. I can still control everything that I'm doing inside of this. And Maschine Mikro is now controlling the Groove Lock kit. So once again, just to show you guys, I'm over in Group B, and Big Machine is controlling the James Brown stuff. So that's basically how that works. So, and you don't have to do that little tidbit that I did there at the beginning as far as using the controller editor to reassign the values. But if you're reorienting your machine, that's what you're going to want to do so that you have the same layout on your Maschine Mikro or your secondary machine as you would over on your big machine. Now, here's where things get even more fun. For you guys out there who have one machine and one MPC or anything like that, you can go ahead and configure your MPC or your other MIDI, your drum fighter or anything like that that's got 16 pads on it, and you can assign the MIDI values. As long as you look at the way that that machine is themed out, you can do the exact same thing with your MPC or your any other MIDI device. You can even do it with a keyboard, and you can set it up so that those triggers work within that. And you have to make sure that you set everything correctly. But from there, you can pretty much set this to receive MIDI from any device with any particular setup, and from there you can play it as a second machine, basically. Another thing, too, is when you're running Maschine inside of a host, whether it be FL Studios, Pro Tools, Ableton, things of that nature, you can actually use the Maschine software as its plug-in mode inside of that host, set it to receive MIDI from the MIDI batch setup that we just did, and you can use the piano roll inside of your host to send MIDI directly to Maschine, and Maschine will pick those up. So you have access to all 16 sets, all 16 sounds of the group within that MIDI range that you've defined. So it gets to be pretty cool. It's really doable, really easy, and I really hope that this video tutorial happened to be useful to you. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, go ahead and send me a message here on YouTube. Go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section down below. You can even send me an email. I'll leave my email in the description below. And once again, thank you for watching. Thanks.